unpack like what was the mob genre audience, who was the people watching. I have 40% people, the mobologists. They want to just hear stories about the mob. They want to hear history. These are the guys that are like have like the org charts in their house with the strings, and they just love this stuff. This is what they love. This is what they do. They'll do in FOIA requests. They know, who killed Joey Gallo, and God bless. I remember one time when I kind of got into some of the nonsense within the mob genre, because there is a lot of nonsense.
Oh yeah.
I remember one time there was a guy bashing. I reached out to him. I said, "Listen, what's good?" He goes, "Listen to me, bro. This is just entertainment. I like you. You're a good guy. He's a good guy. This is just entertainment." That's when it struck me. The other 40-something%, this is just entertainment. It's not personal. It's not gangs and factions. It's fucking YouTube, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Entertainment. Got a very special guest here. This interview's been a long time coming. Tom La Vecchia. Tom, how are you, my friend?
I'm well, Wade. I'm happy to be here, and I know we've been talking about this for a minute, so I'm happy to finally bear fruit.
Yeah, we got you. I think I was on yours first of the year, and now we're getting swapped the podcast here. You can come on mine. And what a beautiful studio we're at around here in New Jersey. Sky House Studios. This place is nice, brother.
Yeah, it's run by Brian, good guy, and it's going to be the new home of the New Theory podcast, which we'll talk about, and just a great guy. If you need a podcast in the area or studio, check him out. Yeah,
so New Theory podcast, but that's not always what you've been. When I was introduced to you, you covered a lot of the stuff from the mob. That's where a lot of my guys, or my subs rather, are going to know you from, because we did cover that a lot when we first started. We're starting to branch out too. But I kind of wanted to talk about your branch out. Is when you first started, were you strictly mob or?
No, so it was the opposite. I started out doing business like in 2016. Okay. I was audio only. Had some really big interviews. I happened to interview Francis back then. I interviewed like Jeff Hoffman, one of the founding guys over at Priceline.com. So I was very fortunate. Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort, Gary Vaynerchuk. So I got some really big, strong audio interviews.
Wow.
So I started out with that. So unless they were a big name, whenever I did like a mob, so I did like a John A-Lite video back then.
Right.
And the John A-Lite video got like 300,000 views. It was my first ever YouTube video. Like it's not even on my main channel. It's on this old channel I tried. I uploaded it and it got 300,000. So I kept doing business, sprinkling some mob stuff, but the mob stuff would do like 10x better.
Yeah.
So I'm like, let me get into the mob genre. That's how I kind of got into it.
Yeah, it does. And it's crazy how that thing just blows up, because that wasn't how I first got into it. My first interview was Lilo Brancato.
Yeah.
But it was based around that life. He was obviously in a Bronx Tale. And, after that, it just kind of started snowballing with different guys here, different guys there. But isn't it crazy how you can do the best, like, touching interview, interesting interview about business or whatever, and it can be great information, and it doesn't do nowhere near as much as the mob stuff. And not that I'm downing the mob stuff, it's great, and I love it. I'm a big fan of that genre, myself, but it's just crazy how much that does, like 2, 3, 4, up to 10 times better, like you said.
Yeah, so they say the riches are the niches. So basically, in that niche or in that genre, people are it's a small focused group, and I'll kind of give you what my surmise what that real number is.
Yeah.
And with that said, though, it's definitely a very rabid small group. But if you want to get to 10, 20, 30,000 subs pretty easily and reliably, the mob genre is one of those genres.
Yeah, for sure. And when I started out, there was a lot of people wanted to, I guess at this time, I might have come late in the game, but a lot of people wanted some high price tags to come. I'm not going to mention names and what they wanted, but a lot of people wanted high price tags to get them on. And you might can speak to this. When you're a smaller channel, you're not going to get that return.
Correct.
If you're a bigger channel, we have a mutual friend, Matt Cox. He's got a huge channel. Almost anybody can go on there with an interesting story, and he's going to get, 75, 100,000 plus.
Correct.
But on a smaller channel, when you're just starting out, you're not going to see the return on the investment. Do you think some of these guys just seen that was a way to make money, and not that they were taking advantage of these podcasts, but they might have been price gouging a little bit?
Yeah, so there's certain guys that are out there that are known that are pay for play. They'll come on your podcast for the right price. Now, unfortunately, you know how like this, so we'll talk about the mob genre in a little bit, but you do one or two things once, people think you do it all the time. I've done over 500 interviews in my career, and I think I paid for less than 5 of them. There's some people that I had to pay for. Pablo Escobar's wife wanted something. Some of the other ones are getting. I'm not shy about who I paid. I don't like to discuss the price. That's my business.
Right.
But I guess with me, the economics were, like, I'll give you an example. Every interview I go on, it's, hey, you interviewed Pablo Escobar's wife. You interviewed the son of Totorino, which was the guy who blew up the judges, who was probably the most powerful mobster to ever live.
Yeah.
10x Agati, like easily. No offense, Agati, but 10x Agati. So I interviewed his son for the first ever interview ever in the U.S., and he wasn't a pentito, which is a rat. Right. He was not an informant. Sammy the Bull is like my number 1 interview, so that did pretty well. So my point being is I knew they were loss leaders for me. I knew I was going to lose money even on Pablo's wife. Right. But that gives you the talking point and credibility to get other people on. So you might get a mid-tier person who would want to hit you with the $500 and the Zell me and all that stuff, but may clear it because A, you have a bigger audience, and B, they want to be on your show because they know you have the credibility. Right,
and that's the craziest thing. It's so harder to build it when you're first starting out as opposed to when you get established. A lot of people don't ask you to pay. And the approach that I took was kind of like investing in the show myself. So I paid a lot of the bigger names in the beginning. Yeah, I paid Lilo, a fee.
He always asks for money, Lilo. Yeah. I not that I didn't want him on. When I asked him to be on, he had these are low numbers too. So like some of these people, but it's a nuisance, meaning you can't have 4 guys on at $250 in a month because then you won't even get half of that. Yeah. But the other really quick thing about paying somebody, there are some guys that I'm happy to give a few bucks to because I want to own the IP. So what happens is if you have somebody on and it's editorial and they say something out of pocket or they do something later they regret, or they want you to edit it, or they want whatever. If it's editorial, it gets a little tricky because it's editorial. Right now, you have your discretion. You can tell them to F themselves, but it's discretionary. But when you throw them a few bucks, I own that.
Yeah. And that's a good point. And one of the bigger names that I paid, and granted, it wasn't a lot for his, what he had done was Tom Sizemore.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And I paid, but he'd done 2 interviews. So like we were doing the first one, I didn't get to hardly nothing that I really wanted to get to. I was almost about ready to wrap it up because we had went about an hour. And he was like, man, can we pick this up another day? And I was like, yeah, that's no problem. And I'd heard that he was notorious for never coming back. He did push off the date a few times. Yeah. But he always communicated, hey, I got this going on, going on. And you got to think, these guys, they're busy guys too. So we finally locked it in. We went back. He did it for like another 2 hours. It wound up being almost 4 hours of content for a price that I was happy to pay with because I was like, I would have paid maybe somewhere close to that for a picture and an autograph at a convention show. Yeah. This way I got almost 4 hours of actual interview stuff from him. And he talked about playing Gotti and Witness to the Mob. I mean, it was really, really good stuff. We talked about everything. It's probably one of the most fun interviews I ever did.
When I had, and we'll talk about it, on my journey, because I was doing the podcasting, I did a 9-part series, which is still on the channel with John Panisi, ex-made guy at Casey's. So him and I created a show, MB and Button Man, which I think was one of the earlier ones in the genre. Mm-hmm. And we were supposed to have Tom Sizemore. Another way to get great guests is set up like a website or a register like a Cision, and then you get pitches. You get pitches where they want, like, pitch you to get their person on. Yeah. And sometimes you get some bigger celebrities doing a media tour, so they'll come on. So we got pitched to have Tom Sizemore on. Although we were kind of doing a lot of the mob stuff, because he did Gotti, Witness to the Mob, etc., we wanted to have him on. Right. He literally bailed on us at the absolute last minute. And I have an actor friend at the time who said he was going through some trouble, and I guess shortly after he passed.
Yeah, he was going through some troubles, man. I mean, he talked about it in our podcast. He had a lot of struggles, but, and it made sense because he was talking about, like, when he was in the middle of doing Heat, which was with Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Michael Mann film. He's like, you're doing that. You're getting trained by Navy SEALs. Your adrenaline is through the roof. You're acting with these guys. And he's like, then, when they rap and you're done, he's like, what do you do to live that or to feel that type of energy, which is why he went to the substances. And he was like, but he said when it was time to go back to the movie, he said I could cut them off because the substance then became the filming. But I think it just kind of there was bigger gaps. Everybody has most people have a limit in the the film industry, and when the calls don't come as much.
Yeah, I remember when he got in trouble for, I think, allegedly, or he got convicted of hitting Heidi Fleiss.
Yes,
and
he
then
talked about that.
He was a tough guy on camera, right?
Yeah.
And then I remember him crying in front of the judge and crying afterwards, "I'm not a tough guy. I'm an actor. I'm an artist." And fortunately, that's how I remember him a little bit.
Yeah, we talked about Don Simpson. You know who Don Simpson is?
Yeah.
Don Simpson was along with Michael Bay. Him and Jerry Bruckheimer. Excuse me.
Okay.
So him and Jerry Bruckheimer were business partners. The Rock. With Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage, that was the last movie that they did together before Don died. He was a force, man. I mean, I think when he died, he had 21 different drugs in his system when he died. Wow. I can't name you 21 drugs right now.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
And this was in early '90s when this happened. They did Days of Thunder. They did. They were like the summer blockbuster movies. They had Matching Vipers. Those two guys are killing it. And Jerry had already said he was ending the partnership after The Rock anyway because of Don's exploits. And he didn't want to get too deep, but he said, I partied with Don. And he said, there's not very many people that can out-party me. And Don was one of them. So he was a force. But that's kind of how I went to it, man. I figured if I invested early and I got some big names, then when you go pitch yourself to other people, you can say, hey, look who I've had on, boom, boom, boom.
Correct.
And then now I'm kind of in that spot now, these last month, where a lot of people are reaching out to me, pitching the same guest, and I'm like, a lot of these people have been on Matt's show and other people's show, but when you get in those loops, they just constantly send you people. Yes. And it kind of fills up the log.
Yeah, so like I would say, and you're probably at this point, I would say in the beginning, I was like 100% outbound. Hey, do you want to come on? Do you want to come on? And even to this day, I kind of tightened up, and again, we'll talk about how I went in the mob genre, then kind of got out. But by going even in the mob genre at the time, I would say probably half of it was inbound, people that wanted to come on the show. Yeah.
So we'll get to that, and I think a good last question on the mob genre when you got out of it. What do you think about, like, everybody is, well, I'm going to say everybody, but, you got some podcasts that are, like, very anti-rat, like The Skinny. And I love The Skinny podcast. I've had Little Snuff on.
Yeah, so did I, yeah.
You've had a lot of people that are very anti-rat, but then you have people like myself and you who's interviewed people that have cooperated, but then we get heat for interviewing cooperators like we're platforming everything else. And I've always said this, there's been interviews with serial killers.
Yeah.
That don't mean that the reporter doing the interview wants to go out and kill 100 people.
Correct.
It's different. You're telling the story. You're not co-signing what they did. You're not saying that they did the right thing. Yeah. You're letting them tell their story. Correct. And to the backside of that, you can't get that type of story from somebody that hasn't cooperated, because if they have any sense at all, they're not going to jam themselves up.
Yeah.
Where does that kind of, the line in the sand with you,
the
hypocrisy
so
in the genre?
That's a great question, and that's something that, you do kind of morally wrestle with that a little too. It's like, even having Pablo Escobar's wife on, I had some like victims of his family, some victims and victims' families come out to me and say, hey, you know what, like, you're glorifying, and Totorina blew up like judges in Italy that were good people, obviously. He allegedly was involved with some bombings, I think in like Turin and Bologna, Florence, and try to blame it on like the communists. So like, like I have family in Italy, I have family in those cities. So like, could have blew up a relative of mine. But I'm not the arbiter of what's right and what's wrong, right? The second part is I like to quote Voltaire. I don't agree with what you're saying, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. So I have an open platform. Now, if I had you on, let's say, and you were an informant, and I tend to focus, whether I did the mob stuff or now, I like to unpack and extract the business aspect. I had Sammy DeBull on. I did not talk about his victims. I did not talk about all this stuff. I talked about he was running a $500 million a year organization. He was a number 2 guy, and I wanted to know John Gotti's leadership style. I want to know how they ran it, because it's not a official corporation. So I look at it like, one, I give you a platform, which is fine, in my opinion. I like to get the business aspect and get your story. Now, conversely, if there's a victim or somebody who is against that person, I have an open platform. They're always welcome to come on. Very few times have people took me up on that, but I had occasions against Johnny A-Light and other ones when Johnny A-Light was like the biggest guy on my show and helped build my channel, and we were pretty friendly. But there were people came on, and I had them on I don't know if John was crazy about it or not, but it didn't matter because if I give a story about A, I offer the counterbalance. And that's the stuff that you don't hear.
Right. And I've had kind of that same thing. Like I've had people get mad at me for having other guests. I'm like, look, I'm not, I have an open platform unless I just, for whatever reason, don't really care for that person. And there's not many people on that list. Like I feel like I'm the type of guy that gets along with everybody. But unless I just have some kind of deep-seated reason why I don't want them on, I'll have anybody on.
Yeah, so I broke down the best of my ability, like used AI even. We'll talk about AI in a little bit. I tried to unpack like what was the mob genre audience, who was the people watching. And these are rough numbers, but I think they'll make sense. I have 40% people, the mobologists. They want to just hear stories about the mob. They want to hear history. These are the guys that are like have like the org charts in their house with the strings, and they just love this stuff. This is what they love. This is what they do. They'll do in FOIA requests. They know who killed Joey Gallo, and God bless, that's their version of history. And for them, it's that's what they love. 40% ish. The other 40% ish, maybe a little higher, is I call them the popcorn eaters. This is just entertainment for them.
Yeah.
And they like the mob stuff, but then they'll watch football, and it's just another insert for entertainment. Because I remember one time when I kind of got into some of the nonsense within the mob genre, because there is a lot of nonsense.
Oh, yeah.
I remember one time there was a guy bashing me, and there was somebody that I was pretty close with in the chat, like not a friend, but like it's an internet friend, I call it. Was in there and like wasn't defending me and wasn't like, I was watching and even kind of commenting along with that. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, what's going on? I reach out to him. I said, listen, what's good? He goes, listen to me, bro. This is just entertainment. I like you. You're a good guy. He's a good guy. This is just entertainment. That's when it struck me. The other 40-something%, this is just entertainment. It's not personal. It's not gangs and factions. And it's fucking YouTube, right? And then the last 5 to 10% is the people that are directly affected. You're talking victims. Yeah. You're talking maybe of mob hits. You're talking maybe informants' families, especially in this area, New York City, New Jersey. I had many people reach out to me. Maybe guys that were, grew up in like, Brooklyn, Elizabeth, New Jersey, Patterson, New Jersey, and they knew like these guys growing up, knew their grandkids, grew up around them, want to hear who was really connected, who wasn't. But they're somewhat involved. But they're usually the most vocal group, especially against a lot of the informants.
Yeah.
And like I said, I respect the fact that you have a moral constitution that you won't share a screen with that person, you will not glorify that person. I respect that. But then I need you to respect my decision to say, listen, I'm just looking to do entertainment, and this is how I choose to do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's all these biographies and movies and stuff made on people that, aren't good people.
Correct.
But and people watch it in droves. I think since the pandemic, true crime and stuff like that has just had like this mega explosion because people are fascinated by it.
Correct.
The same way they're fascinated by the mob genre. And, for instance, and we'll get on to the next subject, but Gene Borrello is obviously like a lightning rod for controversy. Yeah. A lot of people hate him. Probably 80% of the people hate him. 20% of the people like him. Yeah. But I can't sit here and say that the man don't do numbers. Yeah. And from a podcast host point of perspective, that's a good thing. Yeah. But he's got some legal troubles right now. Hopefully he comes through that. I've spoken with him. He's down in Miami. And, we'll see how he's had a lot of luck in front of judges. So we'll see if that luck continues.
I interviewed Gene twice. And I want to say of my library, he's probably like number 4 or 5 in terms of numbers. So he does put good numbers in. One of the podcasts that I did, he was supposed to be the last podcast that he did before he was going to go to jail for like 6 months, whatever. Then he wound up doing 10 other ones. But I had it in the can. And to be honest with you, anybody who knows me, painstakingly, I'm a free speech guy. Yeah. Like that much. To the point like, listen, I have certain rules. Don't bring up my family. Don't threaten me. Don't slander. Outside of that, you want to call me a fat fuck. You want to call me, a rat lover. You want to call me a simp. I celebrate your right to say that. Mm-hmm. Number 2, like you need a thick skin in this game.
Oh yeah.
So the only thing is with Gene, he got a little crazy, and he's one of. I don't edit. I have an editor. I don't edit. He's one of the first videos ever out of probably about 500 interviews where I had to edit out some parts. He got a little heavy on, angel guiding. I think at the time there might have been a lawsuit, and not even just because you have the First Amendment. It's not like, and it's tricky how you roll that out. But he was a little too crazy for my liking. I did have to edit his interview, but one of the first videos that I ever had to edit.
Wow. Yeah, he was focused a lot on Joey. This was when that heat between them first kicked off, and then that's actually Snuff messaged me on one of the shorts on TikTok, and he's like, "Man, you can do better with guests." And I was like, "Well, come on, man. When you want to come on, I'd love to have you on."
Yeah.
And that's how we come on. And he's got a great story as well.
Yeah.
Overcoming the addiction and things like that. And I don't do it as much as I did from when I first started out, but I do have, and I'll kind of break this. I've got a 3-part series coming soon with Bill Cutolo, who you interviewed him, but he hasn't done a ton of interviews.
He doesn't do a lot of interviews, no.
And he's not washed up. I say washed up. His story's not out there for everybody.
Correct.
Some people know him more, the real guys that dig into this, but he hasn't done a ton of stuff. And then he did it with Chris Colombo, whom at the time those guys hadn't spoken in 35 years.
Wow.
And obviously, Colombo family was Wild Bill, so that's going to be a great interview. It's going to be. We had to do that in 3 parts. There was just no way to unpack everything.
Yeah, because I interviewed Billy, and it was it was about a 2.5 hour interview.
Right.
And I think I did it with my buddy Jason, who kind of I'm trying to get back on the show to co-host. But we did a 2.5 interview. We talked about everything.
Yeah.
And and again, listen, people are going to disagree, and this will probably get clipped, or you're going to get this in the comments. But I do believe, in my personal opinion, when you do have informants, I do believe there's a spectrum. I just do, right? Yeah. You have the guys that super self-interest, other guys out for revenge, other guys, they're just slimy guys, whatever it is, right? But in his case, they killed his father.
Yeah.
Right? And no quicker than like a day or two where they come into his house to get like his book and get the Colombo family assets, right? Which I understand it's part of the life.
Looking for the money, hitting on his mother. Yeah.
So we're not talking about good guys, right? So his option in his mind, which I believe, was either kill them, and listen, of the 5 families, so again, living in New Jersey, I spend a good time in Brooklyn, Manhattan, like you run into people all the time that are affiliated. The Colombo family will fuck you up to this day. There's no like they're a gang. They will fuck you up. They may not kill you over something stupid. They'll fuck you up. So they're not, especially back then. They're not guys that you fuck around with. So with Billy, either had to kill these guys that are killers and go up against the Colombo family, or roll on the few guys that got his father killed, were involved in some way. That's what he chose. He loved his father. When you talk to him, he just loved his old man. And you know what? Like, my father wasn't great, but I still loved him. It's like he doesn't glorify his father. Some people feel he does. He obviously looks through his son's eyes, which I respect. Yeah. And the guy wasn't a good guy per se. But you know what? Bill was one of the guys that he was an earner. Yep. But he was a gangster.
Oh yeah.
So I appreciated that part of the story, and that part turned out to be like a 2.5 hour interview. I got a ton of clips from it, and I like Billy to this day. And again, you do form some friendships from this. I don't talk to Billy often, but I have a profound amount of respect for what he's been through. Yeah,
100%. And what was odd is they did make him wear a wire, and he said what it turned out to was he wanted to get the guys he thought was responsible for his father's demise. Yeah. That didn't even happen. Those guys didn't get arrested until later when somebody else turned on them.
Those guys
he dealt with law enforcement. He did wear a wire, but no arrest really became of that. So that kind of becomes like, where is the goalpost? If you talk to him, is that it? You're labeled or not? Because his was, I think, a situation you ask anybody on the planet, some people kill your father, you know who they are. What are you going to do about it? Like you said, if he takes them out, then he's got the Colombo family coming after him, and it's just going to cause a whole lot. But it's going to be a great interview. I encourage everybody to be looking for that. It's going to be dropping soon. But when you made your way out of the mob genre, now we're talking back on the New Theory podcast, what was kind of your mode of thinking on that, and then what's some of the highlights that we can look forward to in that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, what I did a 9-part interview with John Panisi. That's still there. I felt that was a good interview because he was like fresh out of off the stand. Yeah. He didn't show his face. It was very, very raw. So him and I hooked up for a series called The NBA Button Man. It ran about 85 shows. It was very popular. That's how a lot of people know me. I'll be like, although I think I just cracked 100,000 subs.
Nice.
Only 8,000 came from that show. But whenever I'm noticed from that show. There's a lot of guys didn't want to sub at the time because they don't want to be associated, but yet they watched, right?
Yeah.
There's hypocrisy. But so after that, him and I, we didn't have a huge issue, but it was a little bit of a rug pull. So we disbanded. Then I had the Armchair MBA because like that was like what I was known for. So I ran that out for a little bit and I stuck in the mob genre. Then I got back to New Theory because my original podcast, I wanted to get back to business. And since then, since I got back into New Theory, I had some great guests. I interviewed Mark Laurie, who owns the Timberwolves that just got knocked out. So he's a billionaire. He had diapers.com. He had jet.com, which is basically the kind of version for like it took on Amazon. So basically, he had a diaper company, right? It's on diapers.com, but he couldn't buy him direct, right? Talk about a gangster move. Couldn't buy him direct. So he would go to the Costco wholesale outlets and literally buy him out every single day. He'd come in. Got to the point that he leveraged Costco to got Procter & Gamble and Kimberly-Clark to say, hey, you need to sell diapers direct because they didn't want to. Then while they were building up, Jeff Bezos would sell the diapers cheaper to try to knock them out and squeeze them. And he wound up selling them for about $550 million to Jeff Bezos.
Wow.
So you talk, like, to me, that's what I don't care if it's mob, business, but interesting enough is, I'm not saying only, and I'm very happy to, but it only got 20,000 views.
Right.
Like, this guy is a billionaire with a B. Like, next week he did Bloomberg. Next week he did, Yahoo Finance. Yeah, and then, like, does my show. But these are the things but you know what? I felt like if I kind of live my truth and go after what I like to do, then I'll do some of the mob stuff. I did, something on Don Simpson. He's launching a coin.
Yeah, Crypto Nostra.
Crypto Nostra. I was a little critical of that, so I got to ask some good questions from a guy who's an MBA and a little bit of a finance background. Wasn't endorsing, but I wasn't poo-pooing on like some of the other guys.
I think I hopped in on the end of that one.
You did hop in on that, which is cool. That's right. And then I did some actors recently. Furio from Sopranos.
Yes.
Louis Lombardi was a cool one. He was a guy that surprised. But Mike Starr happened to be at the same convention. So I had Mike Starr and Louis Lombardi together. Mind blowing. He actually said, Mike Starr said, totally untraceable. I lost it when he said that.
I like Mike Starr. He was even good in The Bodyguard and Dumb and Dumber. He's got a great range.
The hot sauce.
Where you can do the comedy and then flip back over and do the gangster stuff. He's good. I remember there was that episode in The Bodyguard where Kevin Costner like whips his ass.
Yep.
And then he grabs a knife and it's like about to come at him. And I think Costner like throws a knife and it goes like right beside his head. Yeah. And Mike just kind of drops the knife and he's like, I don't want to talk about this again.
Well, I don't talk about this too much, but there was another reason, a few reasons why I got out of the mob genre. Number one is within the mob genre, you have like some serious creators, right?
Yes.
And he's a little controversial nowadays, but the guy Jeff Cannarozzo, right?
Yeah,
Jeff, okay.
I know Jeff. I don't know him personally, but I know who he is.
You should get him on. He doesn't do a lot of interviews, but there was a reason why I wanted to interview him. One, he's oddly fascinating to me. Like, we're kind of friendly now, but he's oddly fascinating. I wanted to really kind of unpack his story. And I wanted him to tell his story almost unencumbered. Challenge him a little bit, but let him tell his story, right? And he is probably one of the few guys in that space, in the mob genre, that if you like him or hate him, you're going to watch him. And I wanted to get a feel for what was like the total universe of the mobologist and the mob genre and the mob two people. Yeah. It got around 30,000 views, and that was my thought on how big the genre was. I did it as like a genre test.
Yeah.
So I figured, who are the active mobologists? I know it's obviously bigger at a bigger scale,
right,
with Nat Geo and other stuff, but I'm talking about the true mob genre.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, I think it's around 30,000 active people that watch it, but that's very small versus other niches. But Jeff was a good interview, and that was my litmus test to see how big the genre was.
Yeah, when I first started listening to podcasts, Jeff was one of the first ones that I found, and it was where a lot of people would do talking by themselves. Like, Jeff Nadeau does a lot of that.
Yeah.
And so does Jeff Cannarozzo.
Correct.
And I just never thought I would be good enough to hold just me talking and hold the audience's, interest. That's why I've always just had them guests. But I mean, Jeff was one of the first guys that I ever heard that really kind of got me into like listening to podcasts and stuff like that. Then there was wrongful conviction podcasts, things that kind of piqued my interest in getting into the genre. But I tip my hat to Jeff on that. He, like him or hate him, he does good stuff. He does good work. Yeah, and then I did some some mob actors recently, so I did kind of some of that stuff. But then I had some like really great business people on. Like some were like, one was a billionaire, one was worth a few $100 million. Like there's a few different people that I had on where were different kind of success points
where I was really able to kind of see how they did it. And what's crazy is, and then I even have like a lot of didactic stuff, like, hey, how to get a mortgage. Because like a lot of people come to me like, I'd love to hear how to invest. How do I get a mortgage? I have an artist on. He's like it was like a mosaic artist. He did mosaics for like the Vatican and like the president of Russia. I don't want to say because you say his name, you get demonetized, or you can't promote it if you want to promote it. So my point being is, I want to do like the Joe Rogan model of, I just want to talk to people that I find interesting,
right?
But then also I want people to learn from me. If you're going to dedicate an hour to and half of the time is hearing my voice, I have to add value to you, and that's always been my premise. I don't get as many comments as I used to. It's funny. I ran into Larry Rolla. You know him? Yeah. So I ran into Larry at a conference, and he knew who I was. I'm like, wait, Larry, you're the legend. And he actually said to me, he goes, Tom, what happened to your views? I'm like, I just couldn't do the mob stuff anymore.
Yeah.
And there were some issues where, remember, I'm in New Jersey, and I remember a few times I did run into, when I was doing the NBA Buttman, I did run into 2 or 3 people that were mentioned on the show in person, not at a ShopRite or at a cafe, and that kind of stuff. And I now changed my tune in terms of, I really don't want to talk about anything active ever.
Yeah.
These are guys that are out there. They may or may not be doing crimes. I don't want to accelerate that or put extra eyeballs on that. So that was one of the other kind of changes I made.
Well, I remember one time I'd done some stuff with a guy, I'm not going to mention his name, when I first got in here. And then I was going to be coming up to Massapequa to be at a dinner where Vito from The Sopranos, I forgot his real name, Joe Ganascoli, I think, he was going to be cooking, and that guy was going to be there. Well, this particular restaurant was actually owned by a guy whom the guy that I had been doing some shows with had done something pretty rough to his brother.
Yeah.
And the message was given, it's best if that guy don't show up here. And I did show up, but I got told when I got there why the other guy didn't show up, and I'm just like, wow, this shit is serious. You got to kind of keep that in mind.
Well, so my family's from Italy, and the people that I knew growing up, or people that were involved with that life, tended to be from the other side. Mm-hmm. So like, just to give you a little background for your people. So we're near Elizabeth, New Jersey, right? Yep. And if you are from Elizabeth, New Jersey, and you're Italian, you're generally from one of 2 cities. Ribera, which is basically was the Sopranos, right? Still is. And then Vallata, where we're from, which is Napoli, not gangsters, foreign people. But they make up the bulk of the people that are from, if you ever meet somebody from there.
Right.
So a lot of them married each other. My one cousin, who's, he's half Valese, he married a Riberese. So, I still go back to Rosal Park where I live. I go, still go to Elizabeth. So actually on Easter Sunday, I was there. And the owner, presented me to, I'm related to him through marriage, but the guy is a captain with the Cavalcantes. His son is allegedly a made guy. And another guy that was with him probably was associated in some way. And I have 2 brother-in-laws, both legitimate, but one kind of may have had it anyway, and another like totally legit. And with that said, is when I was presented, he presented me as not the guy that he's related to. Yeah. The other guy, my brother-in-law who's in politics and that kind of stuff. So when he presented me, I shook hands, blah, blah, blah. And I'm a little nervous because I'm like, like what I've done. And then I walk away, and my wife's like, these old guys don't watch YouTube. So the guys that I know don't watch this shit. Yeah. So like, and number 2, I don't really talk about that. I did get a little heat locally when I had Giovanni Rocco on. Yeah, I've interviewed him. Yeah, he's a good guy. So when I had him on. Well, he put a lot of these guys around here. Well, he put like Stengo away, and Stengo's mentor was a guy named Jojo Ferrara. Jojo Ferrara was a great guy. He was, I believe his wife was like my mother's second cousin. Okay. And he passed kind of young. He was an overweight guy, smoked cigars. But he allegedly, if you go to Stengo's house, there's a shrine of the guy. But anybody who knows Jojo, he was a stand-up guy. He was a great guy. We're related to John Riggy, who was a boss through marriage. Eagle. I went to he was in jail when I went to the wedding, and his son was there, who since passed. So we were like kind of related. In this area, there's a lot of, people. And again, and Riggy's family going back is, I believe his father was from Ribera, but I believe his mother was from our town. Yeah. See, our town, there's not many gangs. There's one in Elizabeth who owns a place. But again, what I'm getting at is growing up in this area, they're kind of part of the fabric of the community. I'm not saying a big part of it, but part of the fabric of the community. And I just know these people socially. I don't know them business-wise. Right? Or dinner dances when I used to go, or parties, or weddings, or funerals. So I didn't have like a moral inclination to like not talk about the mob. Yeah. But it was weird talking about somebody and then seeing them at ShopRite and then not knowing if they watch a show or were told about it. So it did give a certain level of anxiety associated with it, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure.
And of course I got a ton of threats, but that's another discussion. But they were from wise guys, they were from wannabes.
Yeah. Well, we'll wrap up with this question. Before we hopped on here, you were talking a little bit about AI and some of the things that was going on behind the scenes that a lot of people don't know about, specifically where if somebody deletes a selfie. Yeah. This is like the epitome of putting people in a depression. Tell me about that really quick.
Yeah, so we're going to do another shout out for Skyhouse Studio, just in case we run over. I want to cover my time. A few things. One is AI right now is real. It's present. It controls a lot of what we're doing right now. So very recently, it's been discovered that when especially teenage young women, would take a selfie and then delete it, Facebook would render them a beauty ad to try to build off their insecurity. I talked a little bit about on Matt's podcast where there was a woman who was ordered a dress. It was a little snug on her, sends it back, orders a bigger size, had an increase in snack orders, blah, blah, blah. And then she was getting diaper, ads sent to her. Amazon found out she was pregnant basically before she was. So AI is real. Jeez. Where it's going to go is certain industries you're done. If you are mid-level management, you're like a white-collar worker, not a blue-collar worker, but a white-collar worker, you're in trouble. I think architects for basic plans are going to be done. Yep. You're not going to need, you're going to be able to, sketch me out stuff. And those that are watching, if you're not new, if you don't know AI, mess around with ChatGPT, mess around with Claude, mess around with Gemini. The stuff that they do is crazy. I was going to do a show on it, but I called my FBI friend, and he kind of talked me out of it. I was going to put together some AI algorithm to see how easy it is to try to find Italian mafia informants that are in the witness protection.
Wow.
I modeled it out by where do they usually have informants. They put them near army bases. They put them in like college towns where you can blend in, areas where there's not a large Italian-American population, and there's a certain criteria. So then I took that criteria and then put where are those places, right? And it really spit out 6 hot zones. So in 3 of the hot zones, I said, okay, great, please put 3 Italian restaurants that are there that are known, because they're going to go to Italian restaurants probably again. Number 2, what are the cigar shops, blah, blah, blah. And turned out when I ran this model, and I did it in 3 minutes, when I ran this model, when they found out where informants were, like a Vinny Palermo and some other ones, sure enough, they were within one of the 6 places.
Wow. Yeah. That's insane. I'll probably want to circle back with you again and talk a little bit more about that.
We're going to do a lot more together waiting for that.
Yeah. Well, that'll about do it for today, my friend. Thank you for coming on Crime and Entertainment. I certainly appreciate it. Again, shout out to this great host here, Skyhouse Studios, magnificent studio here in New Jersey. If you need that, definitely hit them up. And we'll put links to that in the description as well as your show in the description. And thank you very much for coming on, my friend.
This was fun. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Thank you.